This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 573, entitled Why the Planet Will Be Happier with the Masculist Counter Balance to Feminism. Description. This flyer argues that feminism has made people less happy due to its monoconsciousness, which causes women to think that they are justified in hating men for the gender crimes that men commit against women, thus souring relations between the sexes. Masculism then comes along and tells women that in fact women oppress men worse, thus raising people's biconsciousness that softens the misandry of the monoconscious feminazis, resulting in the sexes getting along a lot better, resulting in a greater level of happiness between the sexes. Now the flyer itself. Why the Planet Will Be Happier with the Masculist Counter Balance to Feminism by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Lately, relations between the sexes have been very poor. One of the main reasons for this is feminism, which is a deeply misandrist, gynocentric ideology that preaches to women that gender oppression is a one-way street, that women are the oppressed and men are the oppressors. As a result, millions of women are angry at men, and the more intelligent the women, the more books they read, that is, the more feminist books, the angrier they become. Due to feminism's gynocentrism, feminism teaches women nothing about how women oppress men, so nearly all feministed women know nothing about women's gender oppression of men. In fact, most women suffer cognitive dissonance the first time they hear a masculist tell them that in reality women oppress men far worse than vice versa, since many of women's gender crimes against men last decades, which makes them far more serious than the relatively minor ways that men oppress women. Second wave feminism has now been with us for 6 decades and has spread right across the culture. Even women of the lowest educational level, of the lowest intelligence level, who don't read a book in their life, have been influenced by feminist ideas that men should be hated because men are pigs, men are rapists, men are toxic, men create the wars, men should be hated for the horrible things that men do to women. At the universities now, feminism is so much part of the student experience that life for young men on campus is made miserable by the arrogant, morally superior attitude of female students who have the assurance of what feminism teaches them, that women are the oppressed and that women have the moral high ground, so that millions of female university students feel morally justified in putting down men in public, criticizing men for their many gender crimes against men. One of the reasons why the sex ratio on campus is now approaching 2 females to 1 male is that young men so dislike the feminist dominance on campus that they choose not to be on campus and instead choose to study a trade that women are known not to be prevalent in, for example, becoming a plumber or an electrician, etc. Now along comes masculism, and suddenly women no longer have a monopoly over gender politics that they have had for 6 decades. Increasingly now, there are verbally violent confrontations between monoconscious feminists and biconscious masculists who do not tolerate the monoconscious bigotry of feminists and chew them out with masculist harangues and with considerable male verbal violence, teaching women that they are profoundly mistaken with their myopic gender political belief that gender oppression is a one-way street. Masculists are intellectually armed with masculist ideas, masculist rhetoric. So when they come across a monoconscious feminist, they attack her, telling her about the many ways that women oppress men, especially the big 3 of women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, women's forced fathering, which are horrific gender crimes that women commit against men that last decades and cause men, especially masculistic men, to hate those women who commit these horrific gender crimes against men. Those monoconscious feminists who know nothing about how women oppress men are really obnoxious for men to be with, so tend to be avoided by men who don't want some misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi cunt blasting into their ears how men are pigs, rapists, toxic, etc. So, since 99.5% of women are heterosexual, they are dependent on men for their sex, even the large majority of feminists, even monoconscious feminists. But due to their monoconscious ignorance of masculinist ideas, they are really obnoxious to be with, so increasingly men tend to avoid them, not approach them, not want to date them, and not want to sex them. So increasingly, these monoconscious feminist students on campus are living in a social and sexual desert due to young men choosing to avoid them. So these young women suffer. They are not getting the social and sexual attention from men that those women of a generation earlier did get. So today's monoconscious feminist women are leading socially and sexually impoverished lives and hence are less happy as a result. In the past year or so, we have seen a rapid growth in the number of young men who have been influenced by MGTOW and masculist ideas, so that increasingly young monoconscious feminist women are now being confronted by young masculistic men who oppose their monoconscious feminist ignorance and misandry. The number of verbally violent confrontations between monoconscious feminists and biconscious masculists will only increase in the coming years, until there are so many masculists and MGTOWs that the tide turns and millions of young women inevitably learn about masculist and MGTOW ideas, and some of them will be influenced by what the masculists have to say, sympathise with these masculist ideas, and hence become biconscious themselves by becoming partly female masculists, who feel a certain empathy towards the suffering of men at the hands of the massive gender crimes that women inflict on men. If these newly minted biconscious feminists were previously monoconscious, and hence rather feminazi bitchy towards men, believing that men deserve to be trashed publicly for men's gender crimes against women, then their biconsciousing will cause them to lose their feminist anger at men, since they have become aware of how women oppress men, and in fact worse than vice versa. So this masculinist knowledge will sober them, soften them, making them realise that to continue trashing men in a monoconscious way would be hypocritical, bigoted, and morally contemptible. So they become much nicer to men, more approachable to men, and as a result they are much more likely to have a boyfriend and to keep him. As the number of masculists on campus increases and the number of verbally violent confrontations between monoconscious feminists and biconscious masculists increases, then the number of biconscious feminists will grow enough for monoconscious feminists to notice that it is the biconscious feminists who have the boyfriends, and that the male students hugely prefer the company of biconscious women. This observation will turn their heads and put an idea into their minds that by being biconscious they will improve the odds of getting a boyfriend, especially when there is a real shortage of males on campus, with females outnumbering males by almost 2 to 1. It's likely that the initial switching from monoconsciousness to biconsciousness will take place mostly on the campuses and then spread via the media to the public at large, once the journalists pick up on the phenomenon that there has been a major change in men, that is, the masculisting of men, the fact that men now have their own gender political ideology and are asserting it very effectively, lashing into the monoconscious bigotry of women, expressing masculist intolerance of women's monoconscious hypocrisy, when masculists know that women oppress men far worse. Yet the monoconscious feminists believe the opposite, so masculists bite the fucking heads off these women pointing out very verbally, violently, how dead wrong they are, and harangue them out of the room if they remain stubbornly monoconscious and reject them to their face as MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots. In time, masculinist ideas will spread right across the culture. Women will come under tremendous moral pressure by masculistic men to FIP up, so that the divorce courts can be fundamentally reformed, so that GECs, GECs, that's gender equality committees, are set up in the parliaments, so that the gender laws are men-fared, the PARER, P-A-R-E-R, paternity rejection right, and similar laws are legislated. Young women will come under tremendous moral pressure not to be fluffies, so that men are not man-slaved and not divorce-raped, as is the case today. As a result, both sexes will get on a lot better. Public monoconscious male dumping will become a thing of the past, since any woman stupid enough to try it will have her fucking head bitten off by the masculists in her audience or social circle. And since biconscious masculists are better informed on gender political issues concerning how women oppress men, they now have the moral high ground and will mercilessly chew out such monoconscious feminazis, crushing them both psychologically and ideologically. In time, feminist and masculinist social and legal strengths will become equal, and both sexes will have to live with that fact. Everyone will learn that gender oppression is a two-way street, and that the monoconsciousness of today's feminists will be tossed into the dustbin of history, making women a lot nicer for men to be with, so both sexes can get to enjoy each other's presence and hence be a lot happier. We are still years away from that state, but the trajectory and the means needed to achieve it are now clear, at least in the minds of the biconscious masculists. So all we have to do now is to carry the whole process through. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 570 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.